All right.
Artist and independent curator Bose Krishnamachari lives and works between Mumbai and Kochi. His artistic and cultural practice includes contemporary art, design, and sciences. He, being a ubiquitous figure, has exhibited in several solo and group exhibitions in India and in abroad. He is the co-founder of Kochi Binal Foundation and founding president. Bose is known for his patronage towards young Indian artists and is also an enthusiastic educator. Going along with the title, Architecture is Sculpting in Time, his talk will be on blurring boundaries around architecture and its many allied disciplines like art and design and an exploration of their crossing with time. Welcome to KRVIA.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this educational work. Always interested in, like art and architecture institutions when they invite me to speak on art and culture. So thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. May I start with the presentation?
Yes, sir. Could you please share your screen?
Thank you. Thank you. Architecture is sculpting in time.
So
I,
you'll have to share your screen with the share button again.
Can you see me? My screen?
No, not yet.
Can you see this right now?
Yes, yes, now it's visible.
Thank you so much. Um, this image. What you see is Andrei Tarkovsky's a poster made by an architect. It's called the Archi Director. There is a series of architectural, there's architectural figures inspired from film. Poster designed by an Italian designer. I'll come back to the designer's projects later. There are quite a lot of images of his work. As an artist, I believe that, sculpting in time. As a painter, I started as a painter, but, I think, sculpting is also some ways you're doing a better job or better perspective towards three-dimensionality and bringing into sculpting. And when I was designing a small home for my ancestor home, I made a maquette within a day, designed it in a day, and it was executed. And it took 1 year to complete the work, and it was done it on just on a maquette. A small scale maquette was created for building this architecture. Of course, you need to know the materials you are using for architecture, but it was really fun to work with my younger brother. This was ancestor home, so it was a gift from me to his family in Kerala. I was born in a small village in Kerala, and came to Bombay for my studies. I studied in JJ School of Art and did my masters from Goldsmiths College, London University. This book, Andrei Tarkovsky's book, the title of this presentation is inspired from sculpting in time. I believe as an artist, or an architect or a designer, I believe that it is important to have a collective space created for creative endeavors. And when I'm presenting this presentation, it's almost like a statement by Andrei Tarkovsky. His statement within this book itself, you can find Sculpting in Time. A book read by 1,000 different people is 1,000 different books. Similarly, I think my presentation is also viewed. How many people it's viewing, the viewing perception will be that multiples. When we talk about art, it's art world, architecture, or it's a sculpting world. It's all connected to the other part of the creative industry or creative world. Some people don't like it calling it industry, but I think there is a kind of amalgamation of all kinds of creative practitioners come together. So art, photography, virtual reality, video art, or artificial intelligence, technology, and sciences applications in applied arts, architecture, product, light, performance, restoration, fashion, theater, animation, augmented reality, web, film, typography, graphics, and its sound, music, design, textile, etc. I think it is like our generation of people are really powered by really come together with many visuals as well as text. It's a kind of chaos created with visuals. And so how do we as an artist or as an architect, how do we delete, or how do you erase too many things from your life, too many things from, what you don't not necessarily need. So here this my presentation is actually comparison in between as an artist to architecture, like, or an architect to being a painter, or painter being a filmmaker, or filmmaker becoming a theater person. So it is all very much connected to each other. So I bring together, some of the aspects in the art world. As an artist, like, you can think about, you are an architecture student or an architect. Art institution, architectural institutions, aesthetics and movements, as in theories and practices, are all part of this architectural institutions as well. But it will help you to get your knowledge and information from libraries and cafes. When I say cafes, cafes for conversation spaces, I'm talking as, I'll come back to that in future, later slides. And publications definitely will help, from newspaper to art magazine, architecture magazines, to Domus or Architecture Digest, or, you know there are greater magazines as well, galleries. For example, in the galleries, when I look at a gallery, who designed the galleries also I used to think about. I used to look at how the false walls been created, whether they have been introduced, that false wall system in India. Very few Indian galleries have false walls. What is a false wall? It's like a false ceiling. We are very much familiar about false ceiling, but like, it is important to sensitize architecture students or design students. What are the kind of materials used for each and every spaces? Early years, early days, people used to exhibit their work with one shade on top of a painting. Like, that's the kind of usual interior designers also. Still, some architects and designers use that kind of perspective, but I think, we need to change with our time. So definitely it will help checking out to sensitize yourself, looking at your home, plus from there you can look at outside world as well. And in the curatorial level, as an artist practice, there are curators play an important role. The same way, architectural projects, most of the museum projects, whichever I have seen, it is all curated by architects. Curators of from the field of architecture or from the field of theory. So, like, for example, I was watching, there is a museum called Vitra Design Museum in Germany. It is in the border of Basel. Basel Art Fair is a very, very famous art fair. Art fair, when I talk about art fair, it's also very close to architectural spaces. There are so many buildings, amazing buildings designed by Remco Lage to many other architects. Maybe Ramkula's name may not be the right one, but I think there are interesting, great architect designed the places there. So even architectural collectors are there. In southern part of India, there is a collector who used to collect architecture. It's, when I say collecting architecture is something interesting, isn't it? It's a guy, his name is Shanai. Shanai's place is about 6 to 8 acres of land in Mangalore, and he collected architectures from all around India. So it's a kind of, it's only unfortunate part is that you don't have much really distance from each and every architecture. Traditional architecture to historical architecture, he collected and put it together. So I'm not going through, there are foundations and museums and all collected. And in the same way, when we look at education in architecture, also there are theories, or the styles of practices we need to think about. In contemporary art, there are we need to look at the past, the 20th century art, how it was happened, or 14th century or 13th century, how artists used to paint and sculpt and things like that. And presently, how earlier years also, I was amazed by how architecture being designed by, they were never used to call them architects, in India, we used to call Vastu Shilpi, Vastu Shilpam, all that kind of thing, architecture when we talk about, right? So here it is, there are so many theories, and presently there are a lot of VR art, AR art, you can see it in contemporary art. So the theories, you cannot go on these theories each one by one, but there is one school of thinking, uh, that's a style of practice by Mondrian, is an interesting one. Federico Babino actually designed these posters, designed the posters. He is also an architect, designer, architect, artist, designer. So he designed a lot of posters for each and every theory, relevant theory and practices of Indian international contemporary practices. Like you take Anish Kapoor's work, or you take Roy Lichtenstein from the pop period. Pop means the popular art, and it's been created by Andy Warhol. And so there are some examples, I will show it to you. But Babino, like his interest is like, the first frame I showed it to you on Andrei Tarkovsky, archi director, the same way the architect, artist, put together. He called this, series of artwork is called Archists. Um, so when I look at Piet Mondrian, he's a painter. He was painting naturalistic things. Earlier days he used to paint lots of trees, and later period the the leaves fallen off, the trunks become line, the line become a theory or practice. So you can imagine, from this process of painting towards this process of building up something like this, how much he must have deleted, how much he must have erased, how many forms he must have kept on drawing, and and making lines, and working on this. There are many anecdotes I can talk about. We don't have much time. In 45 minutes, 1 hour, I have to complete everything. So this is a poster created by Babina for Pep Mondrian. So there are inspirations come from that modernist period. What is modernism is also another uh, history you can talk about for hours and hours. So these inspiration actually from art, it's moved to architecture and design and things, or in fashion. You can see the fashion by Saint Laurent's, fashion design inspired from Pierre Mondrian's work, or also interior design inspired from Mondrian's work. And architecture, you're familiar with Le Corbusier. Everybody must be familiar, as especially your architect students. Definitely, you must have checked it out, Chandigarh and Ahmedabad. I was also fortunate enough to work or visit at Ahmedabad, one of the greatest design done for Anand Sarabhai. Sarabhai's family, he created an amazing house. That home was a fantastic residency space. I would say residency, when I say residential, it is not residential architecture I'm talking about. The residence of creative people used to come there and live there, and have conversations with Anand Sarabhai and other family friends, and artists like Anish Kapoor, or Frank Stella in the history, and then musician artists, Fluxus artists, John Cage onwards, and many others. So it's kind of, I think it is important to have these relationships. And also Corbusier is one of the greatest painter as well. He's done a lot of drawings, painting to carpet and furniture design and things like that. So many examples you can find in the art. This is also this poster artist is it's an important abstraction. It's actually originated, maybe we can say it is originated from cubism or something like that, but in the 20th century beginning, in the 90s beginning, 1900 beginning. So it's so many theories and practices like Dadaism to Impressionism, Surrealism. All this period was originated in that period of time in Paris. Paris was the center because there was a kind of, like when we look at clubs or when you look at the dinner places, like they used to have poetry reading sessions or performances or, artists, poets coming and performing their poems and things like that. So I think, like a place we need to create like a theater space where we can have a club can turn out to be, or a club or a cafeteria can be turn out to be a creative space, like a creative conversation spaces, and that's the place most of the theories being discussed, or come out of those kind of conversations with great minds from different fields of thinking. Andy Warhol is a painter, famously known as pop artist, popular, figures. He started working, and this poster is also, as I mentioned, Federico Babino's poster, inspired from the popular, and he created architecture from the paintings created by him. Andy Warhol was a sketching artist, or a designing artist for advertising world, like he's also designed the shoes, sketches, and like so many things. And this is his silk screen or his serigraphy projects. And like what is good about these kind of projects is that you can have multiple projects at the same time. Like you can make 100 prints, 100 serigraphy. So he made Mao Zedong, Coca-Cola cover and everything. And also he designed, and he were also made films as well. He made vinyl, design covers for vinyl, for musicians. He was a friend of musicians and filmmakers and all kinds of creative people. I think these are the kind of, and he was also very generous. His studio was called the Factory, and the Factory, there's so many people used to come, great poets like or musicians like um, and also this statement is very much relevant, always relevant from his time onwards. I think everyone he will be famous for 15 minutes, and I think in the present situation, present moments, everyone will be present for maybe three seconds or 4 seconds. Each frame is moving. Each your Instagram frame is the famous screenshot of yours is moving every 3 seconds or 4 seconds or 5 seconds. There are artists like graffiti artists. This Keith Haring is one of them, and Jean-Michel Basquiat. The artists work like so. Graffiti become post graffiti when it goes to a gallery space. This is a post graffiti work by. It's basically a painting, but he used to do it on streets and painted canvases, hundreds of. And when he was 28-year old, he died, getting into drugs and unfortunate situation. That's a period, like in New York, and AIDS become one of the most talked about. And this is also a graffiti in Germany, in the German world, one of the most popular graffiti. There are two communist leaders embracing each other. When I come back to this gallery or a museum space, like there are artists like Richard Serra. He's known as a very minimalist artist, using materials, especially steel or any kind of planks of materials. He keeps together very extremely minimalistic, but the minimalism, his works are more like a sculptural performative work. And his relationship or friendship with Franco Gehry, which is being reflected or influenced from each other's work. And Gehry built this, designed this in Los Angeles, and Bilbao Museum or any museums you take, you can see how material, how this minimalism performed as a, like you can call it as a kind of, I'm not going into the theory of it, I look at it as a kind of friendship in between these two great artists and architects and designers. Like I think each one is like that. And here it is. Frank Gehry worked with the Oldenburg. Claes Oldenburg is actually another American pop artist. I have seen this building in Santa Monica in Los Angeles. Um, and also sculpting something like this using new devices to create something like this by Frank Gehry. So here it is a sculptor. He's a sculptor, an architect, and I would say that understanding space and time is much more important. And this materials used, this corrugated sheets created, the furniture is also designed by Gehry. So I received an award in 1996, and one of my requests to the USIS, United States Information Service, is that I would like to meet people like Gehry, and I got the opportunity to visit his studio. I really wanted to see how architects and designers or artists works in their studio, and I was lucky to visit his studio and receive a couple of his books signed by him and the photographs signed by him. So this all I keep in one of my project called Lava Laboratory Visual Art, which is there in Kochi right now at the Pepper House. So this is a minimalistic work. One of the minimalistic artists called, his name is Donald Judd. Judd was also a critic. He used to write about critical writings and things like that. So there's so many works you can go through it with these names when we look at it. When I look at the fashion designer, um, is Miyake. Miyake is he's for me he's one of the minimalistic designer in the world, but he's also used Asian colors in his work. Also, I have seen some of his designs, watch design, the design shops in MoMA or Mocha, all those kind of places. When I say MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, or design shop, you can find so many design. So architect designed the pen designed by painters, all that kind of things you can find it. So, and also when I'm showing Miyake, one of the greatest architect, Zaha Hadid, inspired from his pleats. He is quite famous for his usages of pleats in his fashion design. And this photograph also, when I look at it, it's very performative. At the same time, it is architectural as well as sculptural. So sculpting in time again. So this is Zaha Hadid's a pavilion designed by her, inspired from Miyake's work. James Turrell. James Turrell is another minimalist conceptual artist in contemporary world. You can see so many. He worked with many architects like Tadao Ando, the minimalist Tadao, Japanese architect. He worked with them. He worked with many architectural projects. What is his specialty? Is work with light, natural lights and artificial lights. Very intelligently used it in many places. I was fortunate enough to see some of his projects in Japan and in Venice Biennale and other places. So Anish Kapoor, a Mumbai-born artist, lives and works from London. And when I received in 1993 an award from British Council to travel, I got this opportunity to meet this incredible artist, architect, you can call him. I think there is no, I think, I call them archist or something like that. So I've done many projects, with the different materials, smaller and larger scales onwards to graphics works onwards to, this is a 60 feet false wall in that, like you could look at the interior space of this museum. This is Incheon Mocha, Incheon in China. When I have curated, Anish was one of the artists in that project, Anish Kapoor. This is the wall's height of the wall is 60 feet. So you can imagine the work, the size of the work. It is a wax kinetic sculpture. And this work was he designed or created for Kochi Musris Biennale, which happened in every 2 years in Kochi. It was in the second edition of the biennial in 2014 when Jitish Kallat curated the project. Why I'm showing these projects is, in 2011 there was a study of which is the most photographed works in the world. It is not the Eiffel Tower or Taj Mahal. It is this Anish Kapoor's Millennium sculpture, which is part of that in um, the place in Chicago, Millennium Park in Chicago. There are three projects. One is a garden space, a theater designed by Frank Gehry and Jean Plans, another sculpture. And Damien Hirst is, is another important artist from London, UK, and he was also studied in Goldsmiths College. Very inspiring, very supportive of his contemporaries. He's a big collector of art, and also at the same time he designed his own museum and galleries, and uh, how all kinds of material, all kinds of theories are brought by him. He's famous in the scale of the work when there's a spinning wheel he painted, so many different, using butterflies and, like a butterfly stand. This is actually a wallpaper design inspired from his work. And there are inspirations from, Levi's to other fashion brands brought painters works for the butterflies and the spin painting and the polka dot works. And this is an artist called Ernesto Neto, a Brazilian artist. And whenever I've seen his work, he was also in Kerala for the first edition of the biennial. An amazing artist from Brazil. And his work is almost like a kind of performative space, sculptural fluid architecture, I would say, using spices in his work, transparent materials to different skins he used to create his sculptural work. So, and also that he used threads and came different materials and these nets, and it's inspired, from his work, inspired the shoes design. And science, the marriage in between science and art and architecture, always, this is Philip Beasley's work. A few years ago, I was researching on, artists and architects, how they works with science. This is actually an interesting. I have seen a project in Venice Architecture Biennale. He created, when people move around his sculptures, it flirts you, it moves around, it's almost like a performer by the material, by sensitizer, using it in materials like so so it's very so the creative world doesn't have any kind of limitation. I mean, you can imagine using adopting or receiving, working with the scientists, and scientists who working with architects and designers, and all important. This is Thomas Saracento, an artist, lives and he's an Argentinian artist, one of the most popular artists in the world, with the two. He lives with the spiders, and spiders create design, spiders create architecture, and use science to. And I've seen many. You can Google it and see how pavilions are all created through these kind of nets. And it is crazy when you live with spiders and things like that. The same way you can see another artist. This is an architecture. When I look at this, I see it as a kind of large scale sculpture, designed by Santiago Calatrava. Calatrava's, airport designs, you can see it in Lyon in France, or, if you go to Barcelona, you can see Calatrava's airport design. So this is the sculpture aspects of it, or the scale in time. And this is another project. There's a great, contemporary artist, and Olafur Eliasson and his studio work very closely with architects and designers, and recently he invented an app which is, you can also look at his app is, augmented reality. He created clouds, he created fire, and many other things. So, and the materials used for architecture, and so it's very, very that marriage. I'm interested in that kind of marriage in between different practitioners. So when you create an architecture, there are so many aspects and so many works are behind. So many people work together. There is a collective thinkers, collective practitioners, collective materiality. So many aspects and the time. Now the most important issue is climate. You talk about climate. You must be familiar in Mumbai. Some of you must have seen it in Mumbai. I was fortunate enough to work with him, or little bit to walk around with him when in the 90s, beginning of 90s, with through a friend of mine. His name is Yogesh Raval. He's a painter. He works, a transparent paper, and create his paintings. Um, Chinese paper he used it. Anyway, Raval introduced me to Nari Gandhi. Nari's work is almost like naturally grown, or it's almost like a sculpted, or adapted, assembled with materials. And I would say that the structure and everything. When I look at it, and it's almost like airy. You can walk around. The nature is part of it. So he created some incredible projects in Bombay for art collectors, and the people given him freedom to create what he like. But unfortunately, most of the architect won't get that kind of freedom of like you do like that kind of thing. So for an artist, it is given that unless until you're making it for yourself, where else you get the freedom. So if you give freedom, you can have. So I'm showing some of the artists, or architect and painters, or architect and artists. Bijoy is one of them. In India there are many, like Ashish Shah. There are engineers turned out to be architect and designer. One of Rajiv Saini, or Nuru Karim. Like I was talking about Nuru Karim in the beginning. When Sen Kapadia was teaching it at Kamala Raheja Architecture College, I used to come as a kind of friend. We have met in a place called at the NCPA. There was a small organization called, but it was one of the finest organization, called Mohili Parekh Center for Visual Arts. And she used to organize seminars and textile workshops. So that's the time I started meeting him. And then we used to hang around. We used to go to galleries. We used to clubbing in the that's the period in the 90s beginning. There was liberalization, and the MTV is coming to India, and later B Channel and etc. So we were very much into music and art and architecture. And friends like Samir Rathor and and Ratan Bartley Bai, all these people really early years onwards, they used to work with the artists and then architects. So it's a kind of association built by them. I believe as a kind of philosophy in art and architecture and life itself, minimalism coexists, or it is part of maximalism. Mumbai city, when I look at it, Mumbai city itself is a kind of really a kind of maximalist city. But this is, I'm showing a Casimir Mali, which work is a Russian artist. Black squares he created, and he's known as a kind of constructivist artist. When we look at it, and then poetry. One of the most minimalistic poetry is done by this Aran Saroyan. When Jitish curated this project was done. This poetry is considered to be the shortest poems in the world. So this one. And this is my work. When you close your eyes, you find darkness. You can, and also I found forms out of darkness through from tamas soma jyotirgamaya. It carries light within it. So how you can create the maximal minimalist work? I thought, it can be created from Braille. This is actually a Braille language called minus plus, minus equal to plus. I was fortunate enough to see this building in garage building designed by Ramkoolhaas. This amazing thinker, architect designed this in a garage place converted into a kind of amazing museum for a Russian billionaire. Inside is actually kind of almost like a lot of maximalist approach, and outside it was really minimalistic. And when you look at Bowery in New York, it's like a cluster of buildings. In between that, there is in the center a small museum called the New Museum, designed by Japanese architect um, and Alexander McQueen. Like, I look at him as a kind of surrealist. The same time, I can look at him as a kind of maximalist. He committed suicide when he was really young, like amazing fashion designer. And in India, when I look at maximalism in fashion, Manish Arora, nobody can beat him in that kind of, he uses some incredible, he lives in between Paris and New Delhi. This work, or sorry, I'm giving you a lot of information, not necessarily knowledge, but this is Pina Bosch's performance. Pina is a German uh, performer, and like this is the first time I realized that this art can be, art contended with everything in this world. Like amazing lighting design or set design or a performative element into it. Architectural lighting, and that's immediate changes of the site immediately converting into a kind of another performative space. So Pina Bosch, actually, in the 80s, when I was studying in JJ School of Arts, the end of 80s, I could see her work and I could say, wow, this is complete art, that kind of thing. And I could see these kind of maximal performance through camera. There are 36 cameras, and this is an interactive video done by Gary Hill for the Kochi Museus Biennale, when Sudarshan Shetty curated this biennial. And this architectural space, interior design, everything is done by our Mumbaiker friend Vikas Dilavari. When we invited him to restore this place, we have done this. It's one of the finest gallery spaces in India, with the false walls created, and a lot of windows and doors are there, which I told him, there is no exhibition spaces, so we need to create actually white Cubian spaces for, weather control space for, some of the work you had to keep it in weather controlled sites. So we created for the Biennale, state government supported the initial funding, and we have created that amazing space for Indian art. This is in document. I'm showing this is because it's politically also interesting, and also architecturally it is brought from Athens to this curator brought this work, and this Martha Minujian is almost like anti-Warhol of our contemporary time. And I have fortunate enough to visit her studio in Argentina, Buenos Aires, and this is 100,000 books, banned books from around the world created. This is one of my projects. Maximalism was the theme I used, and also what are the kind of maximal thing you can find in, I find it religion can be a maximalist thing, and politics, the nationalism, present nationalism is a kind of obsession. Obsession can create a dangerous venomic spaces. And this is a room created. This false walls also I created. Some walls are permanent walls, and like printed wallpapers. I wanted to create it's kind of golden, completely with lots of other materials are also used to this. Maybe you can Google it and see more images. And I used craft and really amazing craftsmen using these kind of association, and it's very important to have it. And this juxtaposition of life and architecture is interesting. Patrick Blanc, we had invited him to be in Kochi for the Biennale, but unfortunately we could not afford him to do projects in India. But nowadays you can see something called vertical garden. In 2009, Time magazine brought out 100 best inventions in the world. One was Patrick Blanc's vertical garden. And it is like Patrick Blanc also worked with the John Novel. I don't know how to pronounce these people's name, architects like Novel to Herzog and Demeron, these Swiss architects, they work together. And understanding of materiality, understanding of minimalism, understanding of the material, like in the top side of this is Kaiser Forum in Madrid, very close to Prado Museum. And it's amazing to see these 200 species used for this vertical garden. And he lives with the spiders and other things, flies and birds at his home. Jiddish was telling me that visiting his studio was amazing. But he's given a talk for when educational program, Kochi Muslis Binali's educational program, outreach program. We organized a talk at the St. Teresa's College in Cochin. So I think it is important that sharing each other's platform, each other's space. And when you talk about architecture, it's like every architect's vision or the dream is to make a museum, and this is designed by Herzog and Demeron. Almost 370,000 square feet of space designed. It was a old power station converted into a kind of minimalistic architectural space. And like in 5 million people visit that space, and then they felt that you cannot accommodate more people in that space. Then they created another space adjacent to Tate Modern. It's also designed by Herzog and Demeron. And it's here inside, you can see lots of performances. There are a lot of exchange program. Tate got a lot of amazing children's programs as well. I was fortunate enough to see, it's 2:20 now. I think I don't know how much time I have. I think 10 minutes. I'll try to finish as soon as possible. This is young Suchan. It's a young collector, art collector. What was amazing about this Nanjing place, Nanjing, when I visited, he showed me around this. He his father invited 24 architects to Nanjing, and the 24 plots given it to 24 architects or a designer to artists. And architects like the names are not really coming, but Ettore Sotsas onwards to David Adje all created amazing places in this site. And it was a lottery system kind of thing. In 24 sites, 24 architects got that opportunity. It's a great idea. I think we should have something like that in India. If someone can invest in something like this. I have suggested to do some billionaires in India, but I don't know. These people need to understand the potential of such thing and create creative tourism, or the cultural institutions can be built through such architectural projects. So in India, we have this Maki, the Japanese firm created this huge place, 517 crore project in India, in Bihar Museum. And this is just happened because a bureaucrat, the chief secretary of that Bihar, he was interested in that. Then he could create something like that. He's been in conversations with some very interesting people. That's how this could come up in Bihar. And of course, culture is one of the most important aspects but many times we don't really care about it. I just run through this temporary project initiated by Serpentine Gallery. Serpentine Gallery is situated in a small, like it's in a larger space, but in a small gallery space. And this place actually make lots of noise in the contemporary art, architecture, design world. So every year since 2010 onwards, 2000 onwards, there are almost 20 projects. They have 20 pavilions, temporary pavilion created for um, this place. This is Olafur Eliasson with Thorsten. The pavilion, temporary pavilion, is called Summer Pavilion. So I'll just run through it, some of the images. This is Rem Koolhaas's work with Cecil Balmont, and this is one of the most abstract pavilion created by So Fujimoto. So you have the freedom of creativity when it comes to a museum or a small gallery space. Give ideas to So this is architect Herzog and de Meuron and Ai Weiwei put together. Ai Weiwei is a Chinese artist, now lives in Germany and other places in the world. He was actually removed. I mean, he is a political critic of China, so he was removed from that country, or he left China and now works from outside. So the Serpentine Gallery is behind this, and this pavilion is an important aspect when you think about the pavilions. Can be a cafe can be a performative place in a poetry reading space, and this is 2020 pavilion project, the Sumaya Valley, and two others creating this, but unfortunately they could not build this. This is their plan to build it into 2021. This year they are thinking about augmented reality kind of architecture, working with some Swedish firm and artists, curators and all. Tony Joseph, an architect who designed this temporary pavilion for Kochi Biennial Foundation in 2016 when Sudarshan curated the project. And there are association with the science and students, architects work with the science. This is a students projects in some way with teachers of the institution. This Federico Bambino also created Architecture City, and so many architects he brought together with the filmmakers. Here it is Archi Director. He called it the poster series called Archi Director. The painters thing, he worked with the artists, architect, artists, archists. He called, here it is Archi Directors. Wim Wenders, you must check out his films. And I was fortunate to study film appreciation course at the in Pune Film Institute. Hitchcock to Wanter to Kieslowski, Bergman, Kassan, Fellini, Chaplin. I'm showing this because it's very much connected to art, painting, poster, graphics, architecture, design. What is not there. So everywhere we can find art. I have given you so many information. That information is not knowledge, said by Albert Einstein. I do really strongly believe that you have so much of information nowadays, but this act of drinking beer with friends is the highest form of art. It's a statement by this right side. You see, from my screen, I can see right side. His name is Tom Marioni, an artist whom I met. I believe that instead of beer, you can have a coffee. I was fortunate. I'm lucky to have, in JJ School of Art, I spent lovely time with Gitanjali Rao, or watching them, or talking to, Kapil Gupta, talking to so many other architects, like meeting Nuru in outside, and many artists like Shantanu Purodi to Bijoy Jain later period and all that. So this site we create for conversations are important. Libraries are important. You have wonderful library. I think it is important to use and have conversations on each and every theory or practices. There are many books and magazines published. This amazing work by toilet paper published by an artist, an Italian artist, who published this magazine, Art Review to Platform to. There are so many. October is theoretically, when we look at it, October is a great magazine to find. There's so many inventions and so many things, and now you see augmented reality. Before that, like art, how architecture is incorporating video films, or when you're designing not only in a museum or a private spaces, some of the people also incorporating video art, like Ashish Shah was incorporated in some of his projects with video work. I think it is important to have that association with outside world and inside world, like, so artist life itself. That's what I believe, as that humanity is very much important. Educational institutions needs to have more and more open spaces for creative thinkers and practitioners. We should have more masters. An architectural institution should work like a residency program. It should be almost like the residency in the means that, like a 24 hours of life, like a Shanti Niketan. You create, you have coffee with your tutors, and have conversations. And I believe that liberal way of thinking, all schools should be art schools. By um, this is an artist's work. The two people work together, and I believe that. Thank you so much for listening to me, and yeah, thank you very much. If you have any questions, I can come back to you.
Yes. Thank you,
Yes,
sir. Madhura, can you go ahead with the questions?
yes, I'll just go ahead. Um, so we have a question that says, do you think fields like architecture and product design get drawn away from the ideals in other art fields like sculpture because they are not only a visual form but also are bound by the purpose to be useful in some way compared to art forms that are purely art?
Art is not purely, that's a perception, purely art or whatever. But I think, like I'll just give you an anecdote. When I was attending some children's project. It's called the Maker Project. Maker Project is initiated by this Silicon Valley person, Asha Jadeja, in Ahmedabad. So what she's done is invite inventors, young people, age of 18, 14, and some kids came up and told me, I am the CEO of, he was maybe 14-year-old, and he said, I'm a CEO of a company, and I received 5 CR to make my project, and things like that. He started saying, and I was looking at with my friends, looking at all these 18 to 20 projects done by some of the amazing inventions, brain scanner, to all those kind of things by kids from Kerala, kids from, north side and other part of India, like, so wonderful to see. But I was noticing what is these people invented amazing products, but they have the content, but they don't know how to make the body. They don't have the taste given by our tutors or the institutions. It is important to give aesthetics, add it to something like that. So product also needs to have aesthetic. That aesthetic, how you can teach aesthetic is a difficult question. It is almost like a truth. You cannot be taught, right? It can be imbibed. So I think it is important that from day-to-day life onwards, you should see everywhere. You can see it in a paper, you can see it in calligraphy, you can see it in typography. So I think in association of these kind of things, art is not separated from life itself. That's what I believe. Painting is, some of the paintings make you think, or some of the paintings make you cry. Some of the performances, it's all, you buy into those kind of things. I section by section. You don't need to channelize that. I think that coming together, that amalgamation is important in life. The product is product design. When you say product, that design aspect is not gone into it. When you talk about design, aesthetic needed to be added to it, or aesthetic needed to be kept aside, So it's these kind of incorporations are important. Yeah, thank you. And the failure of this, I found that failure of that maker thing was that, like this, nothing was interesting to see it, explore it, other than the content of it. Okay.
Okay, thank you. We have another question. Do you think architecture can ever be built without any artistic intent, as something purely functional, or some form of sculpture always pour into it when designing it?
Like I given the story of that spider, or like they building it naturally. They are creating amazing work. The nature itself. We are looking at the nature and architecture as different. I see, um, sorry, I see. Munnar, Munnar, one of the landscapes. When I look at from any aerial view, I see art there. But when I come to urban spaces in Kochi or in Mumbai, that architecture actually killed. Architecture is actually one of the most important sculptures in the world. Architectures are important, but we haven't seen it as a kind of aesthetically. We haven't implemented urban planning. When it comes to urban planning, we don't talk about culture. We don't. The culture is not part of it. When you talk about culture, only that education comes into it. uh, I think education is also part of culture. Education is also part of art. All these aspects. So I think we have to naturally grow. We have to be like a spider. We have to be like. There are architecture. When you Google science and architecture, how incorporated with the present time, it is most importantly we have to look at ecology and climate change, isn't it? So I think be natural is the best way to be an architect. So for that reason, you need to know how minimal you can be, yeah, as a kind of architect. How far we can go much more minimalistic in the way of living as well as architecture building.
Okay, thanks a lot for that. We have another one. How do you see your body of work sphere at present stage through the years of experience and influence through different collaborations?
I didn't get. I'm sorry,
Okay,
I
I'm
didn't
sorry,
get.
I'll just read it slowly. How do you see your body of work sphere at present stage through the years of experience and influence through different collaborations?
Oh, it is. It's amazing. I was fortunate. Fortunate. I use this word fortunate. I'm sorry. It's become almost like cliche. um, These conversations. I had great conversation with. I given so many names in between, right? Or listening to them. I used to spend a lot of time with my gallery people, with my colleagues, with my associates, or Akbar Padamshi, Lakshman Shrestha, Sudarshan Shetty, Shantanu Parodi, Nuru Karim, all these people. When we walk around, we walk around. We don't really all the time talk about art or architecture, but we see it together. Sometimes, poets. I sit with Ranjit Hoskote or C.P. Surendran or Jerry Pinto, listening to them, or Nissim Ezekiel's poems and things like that. So, and Prithvi Theatre played another role. Great theatre thing. NCPA, they had experimental places. I think these walking around or listening to other performers, listening to attending that film appreciation course, all this helped me to create my own coming to. Um, so it's kind of all these things taught me that philosophy of understanding minimalism and maximalism. How do you place yourself? I just opposite with that, or sometimes I merge with it. But it is always important, I think, elimination and deleting or erasing is very much important to learn. And you have so many information, but what are the best for your contemporary time? What are the kind of materials should be used for contemporary time? We should think about it. I think, everyone helped me, and I cannot make my own. If I was alone, like a narcissist, I'll be dying with my images. I will be dying with my obsession. So I was very much receiving from other part of, I was very much open to other ideas, others perspective. So I can filter it. Filtering is, as I mentioned, that it's almost like yeah, that's very important. And we can I wish I was 18, 25. That's the time I had incredible time spending. 25. I used to organize get together at my home. I was not rich, but still I used to organize get together with the senior artists, architects, friends, have a drink, have a coffee, a lot of conversation. So we call it adda. Everyone is home, or your college should be many addas. So I think that's a place you can learn, and but at the same time, only practice takes you further. So that process of making is important. Understanding materials as architects is one of the most important aspects to experience the material. What are the best materials can be used in our ecological issues are happening. So these kind of thinking, there's so much to think about it, and yeah, good luck for that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take one last question, which is, how do you see the influence of Biennale with the local people with respect to improving the socio-cultural transformation through such dialogue spaces?
It's awesome. It's amazing. There's no word. I think, we should have many festivals. It doesn't have to be Biennales. But what is the success of the Biennale, or, how it was instigated or inspired for the local? How we have learned it from the other biennial or other sites. How, like when you go to, I'll give you an anecdote. I was visiting a biennial at the opening day of a Biennale in other part of the world, and neighboring place of the biennial site, kids were playing, playing football, and then I went to ask them, you know closer to the museum, and there were a lot of people who were outside, and it doesn't seems like people are from that space, from that location. Then I said, ask these kids, do you have any idea that what's happening here? This museum, anything interesting happening? No. Unfortunately, none of these kids are not at all aware of, in their neighboring place what is happening. This triggered in our mind, it is important that, when you create something for the city or your village or your home, you need to know the surrounding. You need to connect with each other. So what we have done is educate, like people who are not at all aware of what is Biennale. Biennale means every 2 years, a biennial, it is an Italian word, and it's not biannual, it is biennial, and Biennale in Italian. So we have created this, printed out what is a Biennale, which ones are the best biennials around the world. 1895 onwards, the first Biennale originated in Venice, and now we have 316 Biennales around the world. That some of the Biennale runs for 2 weeks, some of them for 1 month and 2 months and 3 months. Yeah, and Venice was 6 months of biennial. It's also, I wanted to go back to, like, so we have created this brochure, small brochure, and given it to auto rickshawalas and homestays and restaurants. Then given slide presentation like these, my friends given presentations about art and other things, and also theater friends given theater sketches in villages and talked about art and life. It was almost like that, bringing them. Now, that those years, maybe 10-year-old kid, now it is they must be 20-year-old. We can ask them. I think Kochi and Kerala, and that site, the local public is really proud of this project because it given them an internet. Of course, Kochi is known internationally, but this Denali, India's pride is spread all over the world through this cultural project. This is the most proud project you can say created by an Indian or created by Indians. So I think that association with the local site is very important, and understanding this cultural diversity. That secular landscape. It is an ideal place for such projects. So we need to, wherever we are creating festivals, think about it. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move into questions now. Thank you so much for sparing your time and having this wonderful encounter with us. I am sure it was very informative for everybody. So thank you once again.
Only informative. I said information is not knowledge. In knowledge, you need to invent, from that. Just easy. Right.
So
Thank you
it's
so
okay.
much. Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you so
And
much
you
for
must
joining.
visit. You must visit Biennial site. It is always important to raising funds. Students can support. Like we have a crowdfunding place called Kochi Music Biennale dot giveindia.org. You can give 250 rupees onwards, anything you like. Your parents can contribute. So help each other, and then we can create a better world, a greater